Hello, and thank you for joining me for my lightning talk at CDCon 2020. Today, I'm going to talk about a concept that I've been thinking about, hopefully to inspire some thought and some ideas that you can take and put to work within your teams and organizations. The talk is titled Modern Organizational Architecture. Are microservices a model for diversity? I'm Brian Dawson. I'm joining as a member of the board of directors for Ortelius, which is what really prompted marrying this concept of microservices to my career-long focus on increasing and improving diversity. So I'll give away the punchline. All right, my summary or my thesis is that in CI/CD and DevOps, as an engineering or generally analytical discipline, our teams and organizations tend to lean on the process and practices aspect of DevOps or the tools and tech aspects of DevOps versus people and culture. And even as we know that studies are showing that an effective approach to people and culture and diversity is a key to success, we still struggle to establish effective means, practices, and topologies to support cultures. So I'm presenting this idea that the concept of microservices might function as an easy to grasp analogy for how we can frame and manage culture and diversity within our organization as microcultures. And if we can do that, we can achieve a balance between the flexibility and freedom that we as humans that develop software desire, with the alignment on the shared objectives that we need within business and within software development and delivery. And if we can do that, then we can achieve resilient, fault-tolerant, human-centric software organizations. So why am I talking about this? Why does all of this matter? Well, I think we agree that most of us are here because we're within organizations and teams, or we personally have a desire to release more and to release faster, and to do that in a way that we're delivering high quality software so that we're building more stable and more secure software. And we're doing it in a way that we're delivering an improved, innovative UX for more users. As I've said for years, and many have said, a fundamental way of describing continuous delivery and what DevOps cultures seek to achieve is we seek to achieve to deliver higher quality, better software faster by aligning around a shared objectives and outcomes that have a particular focus on delivering software rapidly, reliably, and repeatedly. But we just can't simply automate our way there. We can't common platform or SRE our way there. We can't govern, mandate, or hire our way there. At the end of the day, there is always going to be that fuzzy qualitative component of humans in software development and delivery. And we just can't escape that. I often like to say that no matter what software you're delivering, software is being developed by humans for humans. There may be a few edge cases where that concept could be challenged, but from the software in your TV to the software in your car, it is made for humans by humans. No matter where you're developing in a stack, from front-end software to middleware, to back-end database code. At the end of the day, that all cascades to a human experience, and is all conceived and, most of the time implemented by humans. I'd like to stop for a moment before we move off of this concept of DevOps and pull back a slide that I believe I created in 2015 around this concept of the DevOps Trinity. right? Where ultimately with DevOps and continuous delivery, we need to be able to achieve a continuous systems flow from upstream to downstream out to our customers, and then establish a feedback loop. And we need to be able to do this across the DevOps Trinity, or across 3 planes of tools and technology, process and practice, people and culture. And again, the focus here is, how do we enable people and culture so we can get the balance of moving fast and innovating, but maintaining quality, stability, and uptime, and ultimately aligning around other key business objectives. I also want to take a moment to define diversity, right? Because you've seen diversity, and in the talk overview, I've already mentioned diversity, which is an underpinning of this. But when I say diversity, it's important that we don't narrowly cast it, right? Diversity can be generally summarized as involving or participating with people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds, and of different genders and social sexual orientations. When we look at this concept of a team, I borrow from a study that referred to team diversity as individual differences between members of a team. And this isn't just on traditional gender or ethnic diversity, but it's value diversity, right? A difference in beliefs, goals, and values. Information diversity, what's our experience, knowledge, background. Social diversity, gender and age. And ultimately, cultural backgrounds, various lifestyles, experiences, and interests that compose a variety of individuals with different viewpoints that can be brought to bear. But, okay, why does diversity matter? Well, you can take a moment to review some of these findings, and this is really just a small sampling from a wealth of studies that quantify the value of having diverse teams. For instance, research from Gartner that was presented in CIO magazine has shown that inclusive teams perform up to 30% better, especially in high diversity environments. And that diversity is key for boosting your company's joint intellectual property, right? Innovation, generating valuable outcomes and IP that ultimately show up in your software. And when you have more diverse people participating, it helps, keep biases in check. We can validate assumptions to ensure that we're arriving at the right solution. It's been recognized as an essential feature of teams. And then in the absence of diversity, gender diversity, for example, in this case, some teams were found to focus more on speed than they were on identifying new things or doing new things, things new ways. When it comes to ethnic diversity, studies show that they lost the benefit of multiple viewpoints, availability of knowledge, and constructive conflict that brought about better outcomes. And a key one I really like to highlight, especially in this age where software is so pervasive in all of our lives, is that higher diversity in a software development team can bring about the greater possibility that we better understand and represent the final user's needs. We better understand and represent a wide range of users' needs. And this starts to be particularly critical when we depend so much on data and the way that we treat and interpret data, or we depend so much on AI and ML, or when we're making very impactful life decisions with the software we develop, such as regarding financial matters, who can buy a home, who's deemed a criminal or a worthy citizen, right? In these situations, it's extremely important that we better understand and represent the final user's needs. So, okay, we all, I think, likely agree on what DevOps is, why it's important. Diversity is important. So what is the problem? Well, the problem is that the percentage of women software engineers participating is extremely low. When we get into the US, that the disparity between male software professionals and female software professionals are even larger. Then when we extend that to race or ethnicity, the problem grows. And this is before we even highlight or take into account age diversity, language diversity, geographic location. I contend that there is a problem that we need to address and solve in this area. So let's talk about microservices for a second. We'll set a baseline again. What are microservices? Well, borrowing from a respective colleague of mine and founder of Ortelius, Tracy Reagan, in a presentation she gave, I'll call out a couple of things, right? With microservices, you think about small snippets of code, right? A service that is oriented around a small set of strongly related functions, and services that are together because they change together. And services themselves should be able to change, evolve, grow, mature, go down without impacting the overall ecosystem. And another thing about microservices is that they map to team topology such that each team can own the services it's responsible for, which gives them flexibility and autonomy. All right, another thing about services is called out on this slide is that when you move to a loosely coupled architecture of services connected through established APIs, agility becomes possible, resiliency becomes possible, and more. So let's compare a microservices architecture to sort of our traditional monolithic architectures, right? Monolithic architectures are not loosely coupled. They're tightly coupled. It results in less reusability. We can't take sort of one domain or one implementation and easily repurpose it to another. Code can be complex. It can be tough to understand the code and the business knowledge contained in it. It makes it harder to respond and scale when there's a demand for scale, and it results in a single point of failure because of a failure to follow the single point of responsibility principle. Now, if we contrast that to microservices architectures, there's more fault isolation, so they're more resilient. They're more flexible in terms of kind of what the overall form of language and communication is. They tend to result in people covering dedicated surface areas that protect data security and compliance. They support business agility so we can respond to changing times. And again, they actually support small teams, of which there's a number of studies focused on the power of two pizza development teams. Now, let's compare that monolith to microservices to organizational architectures. Traditional architectures look like a pyramid, right? Power increases as you go up, and all employees and team members follow a chain of command. Oftentimes, this follows a functional organizational structure where groups are based on specific roles or specialties, and you isolate around that commonality, right? When we look at kind of the more modern approach that we see at a number of probably our companies here and peer companies, and we see sort of as a extension of the agile movement, is we don't tend to have a hierarchical top-down structure. It looks less like a pyramid and looks more like a node graph where people come together and work on specific projects pursuing business goals and how they can impact those business goals. Employees are empowered to determine for themselves the best way that they should achieve an outcome. And because you're working in small groups in these modern organizations, across a domain, it promotes sharing of skills and resources, right? People bringing to bear their unique experience and skill set to achieve business outcomes. So we'll extend this a bit, right? Let's merge the two. Let's map this concept of microservices to modern diverse organizations, right? we can, call out some of the common things. Microservices have better fault tolerance and isolation. Well, modern diverse organizations, by not having a strict hierarchy, also enable or avoid the single point of failure problem. You're able to avoid maybe cultural differences across various groups, orientate people in small groups, and allow them to establish their own language and their own technologies that they need to achieve their goals. You're able to get faster time to market and support future proofing, because a small group of people could come together and own their outcome, their path to delivery or path to market, and bring multiple perspectives to bear to help encourage innovative outcomes. You get to enable agility to respond to changes and challenges. And again, as we said, you get to promote sharing of skills and resources. But in this particular case, you get to bring people together from different backgrounds, both in terms of a skill set, but also in terms of view, perspective. And by working together closely, you get to sort of transmit or share that value. So the case that I make, and in future talks and future work, I hope to drill down further and more deeply support, is that we need to look at microservices as a new way of structuring teams to support diversity, as opposed to traditional top-down or even flat team structures that I will hear call monolithic organizations. When we look at some of the traditional organizational structures, they can leave room for isolation and cliques, which discourages diversity or discourages the feeling of inclusion. They place a priority on the few at the top, right? And their culture, their habitus, their learned perspective from their social views and norms. And then if that happens to be wrong, that presents a single point of failure. If your objective is to deliver an inclusive environment for your staff, or an inclusive software product that can address a wider market. And that risk is emphasized or increased through limited perspective. Now, in contrast, if we look at microservices organizations, which I'll say largely, very grossly, is composed of small cross-domain teams that are organized around functional areas, have a structured way of communicating together, and ultimately align to drive a single or deliver a single system. Those organizations enable diverse groups. You could bring together small teams across age, race, gender, more focused on bringing together diverse skill sets. You can foster intimacy, which can provide for understanding and relationships that make people feel more included, that ultimately over time drive more outcomes. You can establish and provide that purpose and empowerment that oftentimes prevents a feeling of inclusion. When you bring people together in small, intimate groups and they have to work together closely, they have a more empathetic view of each other, more respect for the value they bring to the table. And I believe that if we can shift to this approach, then we can move to a place where we have resilient, fault-tolerant, human-centric software development and delivery outcomes that are positioned to drive innovative, stable, secure, and widely adopted software solutions for the future. Thank you. I welcome any questions. I'll be hanging out in chat. I also welcome any thoughts.